Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, the Raiders get shut out by the Saints 24-0 in the Big Easy and now have a 2-5 overall record on the season. So what in the world is wrong with the Raiders? We'll discuss that on today's show. We'll recap the game and get to your calls and texts. It's all coming up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, October 31st, Halloween 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms. And Raider Nation, not too sure where to start, right? I guess start at the beginning. 24-0. Raiders get shut out by the Saints on Halloween Eve. Sunday, it was just a show and a game that really just looked like the Raiders were a no-show. Looked like the Raiders never left Las Vegas, never showed up in New Orleans, and sure weren't in the Superdome or whatever they're calling it these days. The Caesars Superdome, I'm not even sure the name of it. But it was in New Orleans, and Raider Nation was there, but the Silver and Black, the team, seems like they never showed up. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and start off with a soundbite from head coach Josh McDaniels. This is how he opened up his press conference following the game.
Obviously, that wasn't good enough in any way, shape, or form, and that's my responsibility. So I have to do a much better job of getting ourselves ready to go here. We're better than that, and I apologize to Raider Nation for that performance, and again, I own that. That's my responsibility. So we have to do much better, obviously, in every phase of the game to be able to compete with a team like that who's well coached, has good players. They obviously came ready to play and did a much better job than we did. So starts with me, and we're going to work hard and we're going to fix it.
So there was right there an apology to Raider Nation, and that's the only soundbite that I'm going to bring to you on today's show from head coach Josh McDaniels, Derek Carr, or anybody else from the team, because that's really the only thing that needs to be said, an apology from the head coach of Raider Nation, because that was an absolute complete no-show. And I don't want to come into this show. I don't want to act like the sky is falling. I don't want to act like it's all doom and gloom. I don't want to, make you relive the game all over again and all the bad stuff that happened. But when it was a 24-0 showing and the Raiders didn't even pass midfield till about 2 minutes left in the game, there's not a whole lot to talk about, right? There's not a whole lot to look at and say, yeah, well, that was a positive. That was a positive. I mean, the facts are the positives weren't there. And again, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the Raiders, like I said, never showed up in New Orleans, if they partied on Bourbon Street all Saturday night. I don't know what the case was. We could talk about an early kickoff, but to not play at all throughout the whole course of the game, I mean, that was just embarrassing. I mean, think about this. The Saints went into the game with the second worst defense in the league. They were giving up 29 points a game. The Raiders got shut out, and they didn't pass midfield till about 2 minutes left in the game. The defense was stout for the Saints. I mean, and when I mean stout, I mean, that's probably like an understatement. I mean, it was stellar. You would think that Saints defense was about to lead them to the Super Bowl. You're talking about a team that went into the game at 2-5, right? And I mean, I know that their division is not very good. And so now they have an opportunity to get their swagger back and do what they want to do and have their way in that division. But man, you can't go into that game and play that badly. And that starts at the top. And when I say at the top, when I'm talking about the game, I'm talking about with the coaching staff. There's no doubt about it. And that's why I played that soundbite from head coach Josh McDaniels. He needs to apologize because he did not have his team prepared. And I'll say this, as easy as it is to fire up on head coach Josh McDaniels and say it was all 100% his fault, the players are out there on the field as well. I mean, they're the ones out there actually executing the game plan or failing to execute the game plan. The offensive line, what offensive line? Me, you, the wife, and the kids were blocking for Derek Carr on Sunday. Right? I mean, there was no offensive line. It seemed like nobody wanted to block. Colton Miller was getting beat up. Andre James was getting beat up. Jermaine Illuminor and Thayer Munford were switching in and out. I mean, it was not a good showing. And please believe I'm not going to dwell on just the game throughout the course of the whole show because that would be miserable. And I don't want to be miserable. We'll talk about the game here in this segment. Coming up in segment number 2, we're going to talk about what the Raiders need to do moving forward. But, just kind of looking at some numbers, and I always like to look at numbers in the game. Carr threw for 101 yards and an interception. He was sacked 3 times, but it felt like he was sacked about 9 times. He actually got hit 9 times, but he got sacked 3 times. Threw a couple real quick ones just to Foster Moreau to get the ball out of his hand real quick so he didn't suffer sacks. But, I mean, he might as well got sacked 9 times. Josh Jacobs, he ran for 43 yards on 10 carries. So he still did well, but he didn't get very many opportunities. 10 carries, 43 yards. I mean, that guy, he's out there playing like he wants something. He is out there playing like he wants to win games. Devontae Adams, I know he was dealing with the illness, and a lot of the Raiders were dealing with illnesses all week long throughout practice, but he had 1 catch late in the game for 3 yards. And as soon as he got that 1 catch for 3 yards, he immediately checked himself out of the game. It was just, it just was not a good showing at all. I mean, again, I kept just waiting and waiting and waiting for the Raiders to show up and start to perform, and nothing. It just never, ever happened. Now, I had some keys to the game that I rolled out on Friday's show. I like to do that each and every Friday. What do I think it's going to take for the Raiders to come away with the victory? I just want to go over them real quickly. Obviously, the Raiders didn't do any of them because they didn't score a point. Shutout for the first time since 2014? When they got beat, 52-0 by the Rams? I mean, think about that. Shutout. It's very hard to get shut out in the NFL. They got shut out for the first time since 2014 when they took that 52-0 beating by the way of the Rams. And oh, by the way, on the season, they still have not won a game on the road. So that's something as well, especially when the Raiders have 9 road games this year. But again, that doesn't even matter. But let's go over the keys real quick. My key, run Josh Jacobs. Because, similar to the Texans, the Saints weren't very good at stopping the run. They were giving up 100-something yards per game. They gave up 43. And look, I'll say this. The Raiders looked like they wanted to run the ball. They just got behind, and then they weren't able to, right? They only got to run Josh Jacobs 10 times. There's a couple times early in the game when I thought they could have just handed the ball to Josh Jacobs instead of giving an end around to Devontae Adams or a little jet sweep to Devontae Adams on 3rd and 1 instead of getting cute. Just do what's working. I mean, Josh Jacobs is going for 4 yards, 5 yards a carry. You don't have to go on 3rd and 1 and give a jet sweep to Devontae Adams. Just hand the ball to Josh Jacobs. Let him pick up a first down, right? I thought that was silly. I thought the fake punt, wasn't a real big fan of that either. I get it. You're trying to get a little bit of momentum, get a little bit of juice, but obviously that didn't work. I mean, there was really nothing that worked. So the run game really wasn't there because, Josh Jacobs wasn't able to carry the ball very many times, only 10 carries. Don't get behind the chains with penalty or poor executed plays. Well, they had both. How many times throughout the course of the game did you see 2nd and 15, 1st and 20, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 17, right? And it was because of penalties or poor execution, sacks, or plays that just went for tackles for loss, right? Just, it didn't work. And then my other key offensively is 7s, not 3s. Well, it didn't matter. They didn't get anything. So that was offensively. Defensively, be disciplined against the run. The Saints were running for 142 yards per game. Well, they got 136, right around their average. They got 136 on Sunday. Kamara had 62 yards and a touchdown. Hill had 61. And it's funny, on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920, I had asked about players that you were concerned about. And my player was Taysom Hill. I just didn't know if the Raiders were going to have a good answer for Taysom Hill because he was just that gadget guy, and you never really know what he's going to do. And I know Alvin Kamara actually had the monster game, and we'll get to him in the passing game in a minute, but man, Taysom Hill was still such a problem. Every time he got the ball, he did something positive for the Saints. He really did. So it really was the Alvin Kamara and the Taysom Hill game, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the Saints offensively. I know that Chris Olave had some nice catches, had a handful of yards. He was decent, but really it came down to Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, and they had their way with the Raiders. Don't give up big plays. And I mentioned in particular to Chris Olave. Well, they didn't really give up any big plays to him, but I mentioned Alvin Kamara in the passing game. He had 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it was almost like anytime he caught the ball, it was almost like the Red Sea. Get out of his way. Don't touch him. Don't try to tackle him, right? I mean, Alvin Kamara, he came out during the week and said for Dennis Allen, they were going to kick the Raiders' backside. Not in those words. He just let it be known that they were going to win. And he absolutely not only just said it, he went out there and did it. And I mean, literally did it himself. He scored 3 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara didn't have 1 touchdown on the season, and he had 3 on Sunday. Think about that. I mean, a player that's as good as him, first of all, wonder why it took so long for him to get in the end zone, but he sure made up for it on Sunday. He got into the end zone 3 times after not getting in the end zone at all season long. Create a turnover or 2? Well, they didn't do that either. They did throw an interception. Derek Carr threw an interception, which was into triple coverage, looking for Hunter Renfrow. It got tipped up and then picked off by the Honey Badger, of course. So, there was no turnovers created by the Raiders. I know that Trayvon Merrick almost had an interception down by the goal line, but couldn't get his feet in bounds. But of course, right? It's kind of the story of the day for the Raiders. Almost, could have, possibly, right? Didn't. Again, not trying to be doom and gloom, not trying to depress you on this Monday, but 24-0 and a no-show is just unacceptable. I mean, it really is. It's just not okay. My final notes that I had for the game: get off to a fast start offensively and defensively, quiet down the crowd. There was none of that. No fast start, no start at all. Offensively and defensively, it didn't happen. The crowd was partying. They had chopper style, chopper style. They had that playing in the stadium. That was jamming, right? The fans were just having a great time. Everyone dressed up in their Halloween costume, and they were out there thrilled. The ones that weren't thrilled, Raider Nation that was in attendance. And look, I want to give them a lot of credit because Raider Nation showed up early. I think Raider Nation started showing up to Bourbon Street in New Orleans on Friday, was out there partying, celebrating, trying to have a good time, trying to wish root their team on to victory for the team just to let them down and give them a no-show. I mean, really, the Raiders, the players on the field should apologize to all the fans that were in attendance and spent all their money to go to New Orleans and buy the tickets and get the hotels and spend the airfare and everything else that they spent to go to that game. I know a lot of fans that were in attendance. I didn't go. I told the wife about 3/4 of the way through the game. I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't go to that game. Right? Not that I don't want to cover the game. I wish I can go to every Raider game, but I'm paying for it out of my own pocket. So I'm really glad that I didn't go, because that would have just been an expense that, well, it just wasn't worth it, right? Could stay at home and watch that. And that's exactly what happened. So just a terrible game. I thought that they could build. I really felt confident. That's the crazy thing. I felt confident about this game because I thought the Raiders could build off of what they did to end that Texans game. They won that fourth quarter against Houston, 21-0. They had some nice timely stops defensively. They obviously were running the ball really well with Josh Jacobs. I mean, they just played really well in that fourth quarter. And I thought, okay, it's starting to click. They're starting to turn the corner. Maybe they could win this one against New Orleans, then head to Jacksonville. Jacksonville took a tough loss against Denver in London on Sunday. Maybe, the Raiders could catch a wounded duck in the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are coming back down to earth. And you know what? Maybe they do this week. But does it matter at this point? I don't know. Right? I mean, the Raiders are sitting there at 2-5 and obviously not looking very good. But, I mean, just an absolute, I don't even want to say disappointment, just an embarrassment of a game on Sunday. The only thing that I found positive about the game on Sunday was that it was early. And so I didn't have to spend my, afternoon watching the game. And I felt like this for Raider Nation as well. At least Raider Nation had time to go and do something the rest of the day. Okay, well, that game stunk, but hey, let's go out and let's go have lunch. Let's go have dinner. Let's go hang out with some friends. If the Raider Nation was at the game, let's go, hang out on Bourbon Street a little bit. I mean, do something to take your mind off of what you saw on the field. Because outside of a few players, it was an absolute 100% no-show. And just embarrassing. Just embarrassing. So that's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Kind of news and notes of the day, but more and more just summing up the game. If you didn't get to see it or you're in and out because you had things to do on Sunday, don't worry. You really didn't miss a whole lot. 24-0. The Saints come up with the victory, dropping the Raiders to 2-5, last in the AFC West. Just a terrible performance. And honestly, where they're at right now in the AFC West and in the AFC conference in general, doesn't even matter at this point. Coming up in segment number 2, I'm going to tell you what does matter, what the Raiders should do the rest of the way, right? They're 2-7. They've got the 2-7, 2-5. I'm sorry. They got 7 games. I'm already giving them L's. I'm not really trying to do that. They're 2-5 on the season. They've got 10 games guaranteed left. I'll tell you what they need to do in the immediate future and what they need to do the rest of the season. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. As a matter of fact, today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. And if you have never tried therapy, you might need to, or you might want to. And why would you want to do that? Well, because a lot of times things happen in life where you just, you start dwelling on what's going on and what the problem is and not really on how to solve the problem. Or maybe you don't have anyone to help you try to solve the problem, or you don't really know what direction to go in. I think that happens to all of us. We all have trials and tribulations that go on in our life. I know one of my biggest trials and tribulations happened in 2020 with the passing of my son. And luckily for me, I have folks to talk to. I have folks around me that were, willing to listen to me and talk to me and help me, guide me through whatever I was going through. But all of us aren't blessed like that. All of us don't have that convenient person that you can lean on and say, hey, this is what's going on, or hey, I just need you to hear me vent. Or just sit on the phone and let me shed some tears while this is going on, right? I mean, we don't all have that. And this is where BetterHelp therapy could come into to play. I mean, again, it's sometimes people don't want to take advantage of therapy because they hear the word therapy and they're like, oh, no, that's not for me. But really, it can. I mean, these therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere. It's 100% online. Everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable because, again, it's 100% online. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to match with the therapist. Things aren't clicking. You can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It's very, very easy. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right person. Get unstuck right now with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about what the team needs to do right now and the rest of the season, like immediately starting today, and really probably Dave Ziegler, the GM, and Champ Kelly, the assistant GM, probably were doing it already on Sunday as they were watching the Raiders just fall apart as they lost 24-0 to the Saints. And then what they need to do the rest of the season. And honestly, for the rest of the season, I think it should be evaluation season. I think evaluation season has officially started for the Silver and Black. And I didn't think after 7 games I'd be talking about evaluation season. I thought that this team, with all the talent that it looked like that they had acquired throughout the course of the offseason, obviously with Devontae Adams, with Chandler Jones, with Josh McDaniels coming in, with Patrick Graham coming in, with everyone that they brought in. I'm not saying that everyone I thought was going to be a great player, but it looked like that they had, on paper, it looked like they had a lot of talent. What I saw in training camp made me feel like they were going to be a quality team and that they were headed in the right direction. Obviously, Josh Jacobs and Max Crosby, those are some guys that have really been getting after it all season long. But, I mean, you have Hunter Renfrow. You got him re-signed. You re-signed Darren Waller. You re-signed Derek Carr. Not in that order, but you get it done, right? You get all these players and you think, okay, this offense is going to compete with anyone in the league. And as you saw on Sunday, they're not competing with anybody. I mean, that was just such a bad performance, right? Of course, Darren Waller's been injured. The only guys that really, in my opinion, are getting after it and looking like they want to get after it are Max Crosby defensively and Josh Jacobs offensively. Those are the only 2 dudes that I'm looking at right now and saying, you know what? They're giving 100% effort every single time they go out there. And that's a shame, right? I mean, because the team that I saw play on Sunday looked like 99.9% of them were sleepwalking. Like they weren't even there. Like I said, they might have still been on Bourbon Street for all I know. I always brag about when I was there for the Sugar Bowl, when I was covering Baylor and they played Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and I said I owned Bourbon Street every night. I feel like that's what they did. They showed up in their hotel Sunday morning around 4 a.m. after shutting down Bourbon Street, after the street sweepers were out there cleaning up the street. And believe me, the street sweepers do go out there. That's how late I was out. You know what I mean? So I know the street sweepers go out there every single night and clean up Bourbon Street. I always brag about how I owned it. I feel like 99% of the Raiders showed up in their hotel room Sunday morning and was like, man, I just own Bourbon Street. Oh, wait, we got a game in an hour? Oh, my bad. Right? I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. So the rest of the season, in my opinion, is evaluation season. And nobody on the team outside of Max Crosby is untouchable. I mean, Devontae Adams is close to untouchable, I think, but maybe not, depending on what they do. I think that this whole roster needs to be looked up and down and figure out who's cutting it and who's not cutting it. Who's someone to move forward with and who's someone not to move forward with. I mean, and that's as honest as I could be about the situation. If you're 3-4, like I thought the Raiders were going to be on today, and you're going to Jacksonville with a chance to go to 500, okay, then you're not talking about evaluation season. But when you're sitting there at 2-5 and you just got dismantled by the Saints, you are. And look, the trade deadline is tomorrow. I don't know what the Raiders could move on from. Last week I was talking about if the Raiders could acquire somebody like a Daron Payne, like a Sidney Jones, like a Roquan Smith. I was thinking that the Raiders could make a move to improve the roster before the trade deadline. But at this point, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't give up any draft capital to bring in somebody for a season that looks like it's lost. Now, anything could happen. Maybe they can go on a crazy run, 5-6 games, but I'm not banking on that, and I'm not going to try to sell you that. right? That'd be disrespectful if I tried to tell you that, hey, man, they're going to go win 4 out of the next 5 and go on some crazy run. I wouldn't do that to you. I'm not that guy. I like to live in reality, and reality looks like they're not going to do that. It looks like it's going to be a very long season, and that we're going to be talking about the draft a lot earlier than I expected. It's not even November yet, right? And there's already talk about the draft. Not for me, but others. But with that being said, if they could find a way to move on from someone before tomorrow's trade deadline, I would absolutely do it. If the Raiders can move on from Chandler Jones, I would do it as soon as possible. And I don't know the details. I don't have his contract pulled up, so I don't know the details of it, of what they'd have to, what they'd have to eat. But if there's a team out there that thinks that they're a playoff contender and can really take a deep run, maybe they'll say, hey, you know what? Let us have Chandler Jones. We just need him to pin his ears back and get to the quarterback a couple times a game. He'll be a difference maker for our team. I would have no problem with them moving on from Chandler Jones. I really wouldn't. I think Hunter Renfro's a guy that, the Raiders could hold on to and build around. But if a team came calling for Hunter, as much as I thought I'd never say that, sure. I know there's a lot of folks that are upset at Darren Waller and his, often injured self. And he's been injured, I don't know how many times, 8 out of the last 11 games he's been injured. I can't remember the exact number. Don't quote me on that, but it's something around there. I'm not saying that I want to trade Darren Waller. I think the Raiders should trade Darren Waller, but I don't think he's off limits. If a team calls and says, hey, you know what? We need that tight end, and they give up something decent, I don't say why not. Again, obviously Max Crosby is a guy that's untouchable, in my opinion. Hell, I thought Khalil Mack was untouchable, and we saw what happened with him. But no, Max Crosby, in my opinion, is untouchable. I would think Devontae Adams would be untouchable, but it also depends on what you plan on doing with Derek Carr after the season, right? I mean, I know a lot of folks are upset and ready to move on from Derek Carr. I don't think that he's a guy that could be moved until the season is over, only because I don't see a team picking up a quarterback right now, right? I just don't see a team saying, hey, we'll take your quarterback. So with the contract, the way that they structured him, and they structured Hunter, and they structured Devontae all the same way, they technically can move on. I think Dave Ziegler and Champ Kelly, they need to start really evaluating this roster and saying, okay, who are we moving forward with and who are we not? Who are we comfortable moving forward with and who are we not? And please believe I didn't think I'd be talking about this on Halloween, right? It's not even November yet. And now I'm talking about the future of the team and not talking about this season. That's bad. So I just think that it's real simple, man. The rest of the season has to be just an evaluation process. Like I said, I don't think that a lot of teams are going to be willing to trade for whatever the Raiders may have. But if you can move on from Chandler, move on from Chandler. If you can move on from Klee, move on from Klee. If you can get something from Jonathan Abram, go for it. Right? I mean, seriously. Other guys aren't even going to be worth a trade. Like Anthony Averett, nobody's trading for Anthony Averett. Amik Robertson, nobody's trading for Amik Robertson. I mean, they're just not. There's not enough talent there. There's not enough ability, even though I thought that they could be good pieces to this team. It's just not getting it done. So if there is a guy that a team calls about, then you've got to listen to that conversation. And I hate that that's the conversation that we're having right now, because, man, I sure would like to talk about a team that is contending in the AFC West. They're challenging the Chiefs for a division title. They're pushing for that wild card. Like, I would love to talk about that. And instead, it just it feels like this season is a wash. Now, it's clearly not. There's still, like I said, double-digit games left. Josh McDaniels talked about we're going to get it fixed. Wouldn't be surprised if they go out there this week and beat up on the Jags, and then people start feeling good about them again. But you can't win a game, lose a game. Win a game, lose a game. You can't not win a game on the road. You can't not start games. Everything that they did on Sunday, you can't do if you think that you're going to be a really good team. People got mad at me when I was on my radio show and said this team is better than what their record was. That's when they were 0-3. And I said, no, they are a good team. They're just not getting it done. Well, I have to correct myself. They're just not a good team. I mean, that's just the bottom line. They're not a good team. And it was so obvious on Sunday that they're just not. They weren't ready to go out there and compete. Again, outside of Josh Jacobs and Max Crosby, those are the only two dudes that are really getting after it. Derek Carr got hit 9 times. Andy Dalton got hit 0. 0. And I know Max is giving every effort he has, but, man, he needs some help from somebody, anybody. It's just not happening. And look, they didn't pick up the 5th-year option on Josh Jacobs. A lot of people say, oh, well, you got to keep him around, got to franchise him, got to do this and that and the other. I doubt it. At this point, maybe they do. Maybe they keep him around. I would love for them to keep him around. Love Josh Jacobs. Hell of a player. But, I mean, hell, he might look at it and say, do I want to be around here? Right? Depending on how the rest of the season goes, he might decide he doesn't want to be a part of the Raiders. He might say, you know what? That free agent deal is sounding a lot better and better each and every day. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying that that's how he could be feeling because he's, in his mind, is a winner. And this team is not a winner. And that's unfortunate. Coming up in segment number 3, calls and texts. Do you think it's evaluation season now for the Raiders? Let me know about it. 707-365. That's not the number. I don't know how many numbers I got going on in my head. I got the radio station phone number. I got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. What is it? 707-654-4693. There you go. Had to think about that one. I had to look up in the sky and pull it from here. Wait, hold on. What's the number? Boom. That's what I had to do. So there you go. 707-654-4693. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about our good friends at Blue Nile. And Blue Nile is the original online jeweler. It offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. They've helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose a diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers then will help you handcraft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. If you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but you're still having trouble choosing, well, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available by way of phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Shop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use that promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Central Valley Raider. He's calling to talk about the game and how embarrassing the game was, and in particular, how unmotivated and uninspired the Raiders look. Here he is, Central Valley Raider.
Hey, Q, this is Central Valley Raider. Hey, just calling in to chime on the game. Very disappointing. There's a big difference of losing but being competitive. There's a difference of losing and getting your butt just dominated in every facet of the game. And that's what happened today. I just didn't see any juice from anybody. I know they tried to get it going. Then I thought in just past games this year, we're starting to be slow starters. Then I thought about that old going to the East Coast kind of situation, starting early games, and I thought, no, we had overcome that a few years ago. But just today was just one of the worst games. I've actually had to turn the game off and started doing, the honeydews around the house, and it's been a very long time since I did that. But anyways, key things that I noticed, I just felt Carr was just uncomfortable today. I don't know if the Saints D line is that dominant. Just looking at past games and on Sundays, I just don't think we were prepared. We knew they were going to come in and just balls out, just blitz us, and they didn't blitz us even. The Ford just dominated our O-line, and I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. We had a couple good games with the O-line, and today just was a slap in the face. Receivers, the young receivers of the Saints just dominated Adams. I mean, they were on it. They knew they were going to get to one of the best, and they were hyped about it. I just felt Devontae was out here just sleepwalking. Didn't see really any Renfro, and if I'm wrong about that, it was probably because I didn't see it because I had changed the channel. The only one that I seen was our tight end, who I always thought was really good. And defensively, man, we're horrible. Linebackers, we got some decent linebackers. We got our guys up in the front, but we just get picked apart. That's kind of some of the things I've seen, Q. Just wanted to share that. And maybe this week we can talk about, was it a bad choice that Mark picked this guy to be the head coach? and calling the play calling, and it just because it just seems really dry, just really dry. All right, Q, that's all I got. Central Valley Raider is out.
Thank you so much for that call, my man. I appreciate you. And it was bad. It was embarrassing. Nobody looked comfortable, right? Carr, Adams, and look, say this about Devontae Adams. He was sick all week long. He looked like he was sick all week long. He just did not look inspired. He did look like he had that catch along the sideline where both feet looked like they were in bounds, and there was a little bit of green in between him and the sideline, but it was one of those where it just wasn't enough to overturn it. So it just, again, going back to what head coach Josh McDaniels said when he opened up his press conference, man, it was on him, and it was 100% on him. He looked, or that team looked like they were very unprepared. Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, I talked about them multiple times, looked like the only guys that were out there competing. Foster Morrow, he played a good game in his homecoming, but obviously his performance was overshadowed by everything that the Raiders did bad. But he looked good, sliding in there for Darren Waller. But, I mean, he could only do so much. Not having Hunter catch the ball for a long time, not having Devontae get a catch until super late in the game, having to bring Jarrett Stidham in because Carr's getting pummeled. I mean, geez, one thing after the other, right? It was really bad. And then to be shut out for the first time since 2014 tells you a lot. So thank you so much for that call. Appreciate you. Next up, I got a text from Hondo in the 530. Hey, Q, I saw the game with a lot of loyal Raider fans from inside the Superdome today. I watched the Raiders sideline, the body language. Raider fans didn't deserve to see the product on that field today. Either the team played hungover or the coach has lost his team. All I wanted for the rest of the season was a team that physically beat the hell out of other teams. But now it seems like the effort from the majority of these businessmen, employees, has disappeared. I'm sad. R.I.P. Coach McDaniels. That's from Hondo in the 530. Thank you for that text. And yeah, the body language looked terrible. Derek Carr looked like he was just in another world, in another zone, sitting on the sideline or sitting on the bench there. Just kind of looked like he was in another world, just out of there. Just no sense of urgency, no excitement. I've never been a professional athlete, never will be a professional athlete. This is as professional as it gets from me. It's radio and podcasting, right? That's what I do professionally. But I'll tell you what, if something's going bad for me, I know it's bad and I'm angry and I show that emotion, right? If I'm having a bad radio show, I'll say in a commercial break, like, look, man, we need to step this up. The show sucks. I'll be the first to say that. And most people will be like, oh, the show was great. And I know better. And I'll be fired up. I'll be pumped up. I'll be like, man, it's got to be better. To me, I didn't see that fire on the sideline. And that, to your point, is a problem. Who's going to step up and be like, hey, man, y'all wake the hell up, right? Are you guys going to play football today? Are you going to look at the costumes? It just felt like they were there to check out the costumes and have the good food that was in New Orleans. It was definitely not a business trip for them. We'll see what happens now that they're in, Jacksonville, or not Jacksonville, they're in Sarasota. They're not coming back to Las Vegas. They're going to stay on the East Coast so they can prepare for the Jaguars. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to be there all week, so my coverage of the team will be from a distance. So we'll see how that shakes out. But, man, it was bad. It really was. And I'm trying to do everything I can to not, make the show sound doom and gloom and like we're all walking around with a cloud of rain over our heads. But that's what it feels like, right? Thanks for the text, my man. Next up, IC Raider in Carson County. He's calling to talk about the team, but in particular wants to talk about the coach. Here he is, IC Raider in Carson County.
What's up, Q? This is IC Raider from Carson, California. I'm a new booty on this podcast. It'd be nice if you play that new booty song for me, man, for one time. Anyways, I'm calling because I was just so shocked that the Raiders played so poorly. And I'm not a man that acts out of desperation or says things out of desperation. And I've been really holding my tongue to say this until the time was right. And I think right now the time is right. I think Josh McDaniels isn't the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. And when I say that, I mean, some people are good as coordinators. I'm not taking that away from him. It's no mistake why so many people around the NFL value him as an offensive coordinator and is respected really good across the league with that talent that he has. But the thing that he lacks is leadership and being able to make the right calls in the big moments or making the right calls in certain moments. Um, I just don't think he reacts well under pressure. I really don't think that he has a formula that he likes to follow consistently week in and week out. I just feel like he's kind of all over the place, and everyone just looks lost. So I don't really think that he'd be the leader that we need, the head coach that we need for the Las Vegas Raiders. I just don't see him finishing the season as the head coach, and if he does, I don't think he'll come back next year. And I really do think we should look at another head coaching option, and maybe someone else at quarterback at this point. But we cannot have all this talent and play this poorly. Not when a great leader last year and Rich Bisaccia took us to the promised land with just his leadership and poor offensive play calling from Greg Olson. So I just think it's time for a change, and I think it's better to do it now before we let this drag on and waste prime years of a very talented squad. Anyways, Q, this is IC Raider. Thank you for doing what you do, for being professional, being consistent. Appreciate everything that you do, brother. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. Thanks for being a new booty, man. And hopefully next time you call, it's on a positive note, right? Not about a game like we just saw on Sunday. And I'm not sure really what the right answer is, but when it comes to leadership, I could definitely agree with the lack of leadership on the coach's part. Defensive coordinator, head coach, offensive line coach. I mean, all of them. I mean, the offensive line was horrendous, right? We've been talking about the offensive line for the longest. And I thought it was a bad idea to go into the season not having a starting five on the offensive line. I still think it was a bad idea. And whatever they're doing with their rotation, I still don't like it. They needed to address that and get that solidified from the jump, and it never happened. But I'll say this, as far as leadership goes, I didn't see the leadership from the players on the field with the C's on their chest either. I mean, at one point, did you see Derek Carr get angry and go and get his team fired up? Did you see Devontae Adams go get angry, get his team fired up? Did you see Max Crosby go get his team fired up? Did you see Mac Hollins go get his team fired up? AJ Cole, did you see him go try to get him fired up? Denzel Perryman, right? I mean, these are all captains. These guys all have the C's on the chest, and they actually had the C's on their chest on Sunday. They finally, for the first time, got their C's on their chest, and it didn't look like they earned them. I didn't see any of those guys trying to get that team fired up. And all I saw was Josh Jacobs working his tail off to try to do something when he got the ball in his hands. Thank you for that call. I do appreciate you. Next up, I got a text from Jolly Roger J from the OC. Hey, Q, this was a heartbreaker. And as I've heard you say, you are what your record says you are. With the talent on this team, this is just unfortunate. And before fans get crazy and go in on DC, this was never his fault. In my opinion, this was on Mark Davis. The Raiders were a playoff caliber team with a stable coaching infrastructure that won under the worst circumstances and that the players pounded the table for less than a year ago. But once again, Carr and everyone else had to learn a new system and build new relationships with people that they don't know and may not work well with. Mr. Davis now has tanked the season and taken a prime year away from several players in hope of future success. I believe this approach of one step back to take two steps forward was a bad gamble for a team already on the come up. What are your thoughts? Jolly Roger J out. Thank you for the text, my man. And look, I know a lot of people are still talking about Rich Bisaccia and want him to be the head coach. I personally, I've said it many times on the show, I think that the Raiders caught lightning in the bottle. They rallied around each other because of the circumstances that you mentioned, and they ended up in the playoffs. I don't think Rich Bisaccia, and this is just me, I don't think he was the long-term head coach solution. I think Josh McDaniels is a good head coach. Well, I think he's a good coach. He's obviously proven to be a good coordinator, hasn't proven to be a good head coach. He's got to prove that. I can't say that. I can say he's a really good coordinator. I figured with him and the new weapons that they have, especially Devontae Adams, adding him to the mix, it was going to make this team that much better. Obviously, it has not gone there. I don't know if the players aren't bought in. I mean, I'm around them. They say all the right things. I see them in practice. They look like they're all out there competing. They're feeling good about themselves. I think that they did good things by giving players that were there contract extensions to let them know how much they're appreciated, like Max Crosby, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Derek Carr. I mean, they gave all those guys contract extensions, right? So I think that they approached everything the right way. It just has not panned out. I don't know what the next step is unless it's, like I said, start evaluating every single game, evaluate every player. What do they bring to the table? Can you build around them? Are they someone to move forward with? I think that's just what you have to do. You have to evaluate every single player and then decide what to do. I don't want to say that this season was tanked or wasted, but it almost feels like the season was wasted. It just really does, and that sucks. Believe me, it is nothing more fun than covering a winning team. I don't care what team. I don't care if it's high school, college, the pros. If they're winning, it's fun to cover a team. So believe me, this is no fun for me either. This is terrible. This is a terrible twist on the season that did not look like it was going to be like this. Did not feel like it was going to be like this in the offseason when the Raiders were making moves. And that's going to do it for today's show. Again, not trying to sound doom and gloom, not trying to be that guy, not trying to start your Monday off the wrong way. But I mean, there's no way I can shine that up and make it sound any better or look any better without just straight up lying to you. And I'm not going to do that. I'll never lie to you about something like that. So Raider Nation, we're going to all stick together. We're going to try to stick together, right? We're going to do the best we can. Continue to bring you everything that we do each and every week. We'll hear from head coach Josh McDaniels. Matter of fact, 7:30 this morning, since he's on the East Coast, it's going to be very early for us, 7:30 this morning. So depending on what time you're listening to this or watching it, because it's on YouTube now, shameless plug, he might have already spoke. But, we'll ask him some questions. We'll see what he has to say. Again, I'm not there in Sarasota. I'll be in Las Vegas all week long. So have to talk to him by way of Zoom. And other coaches throughout the course of the week, we'll talk to them by way of Zoom. And I'll bring you everything I can for the show. And hopefully it continues. They find some kind of sense of togetherness, I guess, while they're on the road and put in a better performance next week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But we got all week to talk about the game, talk about the team. The trade deadline comes up tomorrow. So what are the Raiders going to do? Are they going to be sellers? I wouldn't have any problem if they did, especially a guy like Chandler Jones in that contract. If they can get from underneath that, that'd be great. But again, not sure what they're going to do, but it is coming up tomorrow. So enjoy your Halloween, Raider Nation. Hopefully it's a lot better than that game was on Sunday. Appreciate you for always making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Got a shout out to my man, Ari. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. He's the reason why we're on YouTube. He said, Q, got to cut this out. You got to get on YouTube. So he's making that happen. So shout out to Ari. I do appreciate you. Appreciate everyone over the weekend who subscribed to the Raiders YouTube as well. We started out, I think on Thursday was our first real YouTube show, and now we're over 1,000 subscriptions already over the weekend, just over the course of the weekend. So shout out to you, Raider Nation. Man, I definitely appreciate the support and try to bring you everything I can each and every day. So again, thanks again for making the show your first listen each and every day. And you can find that show free and available on all platforms. Till tomorrow, Raider Nation, we'll have more calls and texts. We'll have more news and notes, and we'll have plenty to talk about here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Until then, stay safe, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, especially on this Halloween, just win, baby.